Greetings, everyone. Welcome back to my sketchbook. This morning, I'm just going to doodle something kind of strange. Something that I don't typically do. Yeah, well, let's see here. I'm going to go to this level. We'll lock it down. See if it starts off messy, and then well, you know what? My goodness. Okay. So, when I was a kid, I would look for awesome movies or be told about awesome movies. And I was introduced to anime when I was a kid. And I used to think, oh, this is the coolest thing. It's not fluffy. Some of it I probably shouldn't have been watching. Yeah, probably a lot of it I probably shouldn't have been watching. So, what am I getting at here? There's something kind of interesting. I don't really draw in this style. That's not really typically my thing. So you're going to see probably a version of this that doesn't really make sense because I'm not a mangaka, something like that. I'm not saying that what artists of the manga do is that they have to produce high volumes of things very quickly, and there's a part of that style that kind of gets blurry and strange sort of animation kind of inspired things, like, you know, the hyper expressive eyes, the I don't know if you want to call them veins of frustration or angst, but there's something kind of interesting, and it's very unique to manga, and it's not something that I always lean towards. So I do enjoy the art. It's not something that I, as I say, typically would do. Those super duper eyes, for one, I always start with the eyes with just doodling, but I don't usually draw eyes like this, like super expressive eyes. Anyway, let's see where we're going here. The other thing is, I have great difficulty with the almond shape of the body, not the body, the chin, body. So that sort of chin, not typical of me to try to figure that out. But we'll see. Now, something else, though, that I'm a big fan of is trying to figure out a type of, what would you want to call this now? I don't know if I'd call this like a Tetsuo, like craze face. So amongst the first anime that I would have seen would have been like Macross, like the Robotech stuff, and Akira, and Fist of the North Star. And often there's a character that's having like kind of a crash out. I don't know if that's the best word, but for some reason, that's kind of like, I always enjoy the crazed look. Now, this one isn't super crazy, but we're going to try something here. So you might recognize certain things. I don't know. The forehead isn't super high here. But yeah, this little chin thing, not always easy for me to try to think about. Fist of the North Star. That was something wild. Or Vampire Hunter D. That was also something wild. Let's back this out just a little bit. Let's go to there. I always like drawing hair, but I suffer with it because I want to put as many strands in so I don't really think of bands of hair or ribbons of hair. So I'm going about this in sort of a light way. I don't want to complicate the drawing too much. I'm just trying to get this to not be blurry. All right. I'm going to assume that the majority of the hair is tied back. And I'll kind of put in some detail after. Like I said, right now we're going kind of light. I'm not purposely going for a Jennifer Aniston wraparound hairdo. Something kind of is happening that way, though. Now, we're going to run into a part of this character that will probably tell you who this is, or one of the parts anyway. In my mind, this character has attributes based on Muhammad Ali. I'm not super familiar with the whole lore behind this character, but there's like I said, there's kind of a similarity, especially in the fighting style. Some would say that this would be one of the, well, I'm going to preface this whole thing, semi-spoiler alert, although it's been years. This was one of the most interesting characters in a series, I think, as one of the weakest pillars. Now, maybe that's a clue, I guess, as well. And for lots of reasons, had this sort of imposter kind of syndrome thing going on with her. Sometimes referred to as the insect killer. You know what? Let's add a little bit of color to this just for fun before we get too far along. Some of the techniques that this slayer of demons would have would be based on poison, more so than other things. In fact, the sword that this character used was more like a needle than anything else. Very thin sword. And as I said in regards to Muhammad Ali, one of the most famous sort of lines that you'd hear about Muhammad Ali would be to float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. The detail in the teeth or whatever, that's not really typical that you'd see that often. Let's see where this is. Come on now. I suffer with this phone. I suffer with this camera as I'm using a phone. Now let's see. Make that nose seem just a little bit smaller, maybe. The story arc of this character has to do more with revenge and getting rid of a demon responsible for taking the life of her sister. And kind of an interesting thing, I suppose. I'm just sort of adding a little bit of darkness in here because I'm going to bring out my brush here, brush and water soon. Let's try a little bit of this first down here. Then we'll go with a slightly darker. Maybe, maybe not. We're just putting in a hint of that. From the purple up for a moment. Actually, let's try a bit more of that. We sculpt in these bangs. So the character's name is Shinobu Kocho. And from the series Demon Slayer, or the Demon Slayer series. but an interesting character. Perhaps at some point I may do kind of like a full body kind of thing with her. As I said, this isn't really perfectly in my wheelhouse. And it doesn't have to be. That's the funnest part. It doesn't have to be. Do my take on something is kind of more fun. Now, where else do I need to go here? Well, I can probably drift in a few more little scratches down here. Around the button, which you didn't get to see. Just scratching in some stuff here. This shawl is kind of like butterfly wings when spread out. Some of the abilities of this character is said to resemble that of the chestnut tiger butterfly, which is a butterfly that has the ability to store poison. So whenever you develop a story and you develop characters, you often come up with like a story arc, and you want something to resolve. So you kind of think of how that character might move along and how that character might end. As I said, this one was kind of a revenge thing, going after Doma, who was responsible for the death of her sister, who's a demon. Now, what's interesting is a lot of these demons were once human. Now, I'm just putting in a little bit of detail, and then we can kind of let this one go. I'm going to go out just a little bit, and then maybe let this go. So, going back in. Not the craziest face. That's all right. A little bit better around the eyes here so that they are definitely more prominent. For the most part, you're not going to see tons and tons of detail, tons. In some of these faces, they would be pretty smooth, unless they're in that frightening mode. So a lot of that stuff that I really did enjoy about like SpongeBob and Ren and Stimpy, which would be that extreme close-up, grotesque expressions. Well, you didn't really get to see that all the time because it takes so much time. Now, let's see if I can just darken this back here a little bit. We'll leave some highlights of sorts, some space where the moonlight can hit it, although the ideal place for hunting demons is in daylight. But you wouldn't really necessarily catch a demon hanging out in daylight, so let's go back here for a moment. All right, let's have a few straggles of hair, which is my thing. Close out the face, and let's kind of let this end. We'll get a little bit of this in the mouth, and maybe we can drag out some of the ink a little bit at the same time, so it's in there in the shadow just a little bit. And actually, before I go too far with that, just a little bit here. So not perfectly in a rage, but just about getting there. All right, one last super zoom in. Maybe we can back that out just a little bit. All right, well, that's sort of my take in under 25 minutes of Shinobu from Demon Slayer, who ultimately made the ultimate sacrifice to take down a terrible demon in vengeance. All right. Well, again, not really in my sort of wheelhouse, but something that's just kind of fun. All right, folks, I hope you have a wonderful day, and hopefully we'll see you at some point in the near future. And yeah, maybe I need to just kind of put the pen down here, huh? All right, folks. Ciao for now.